The Arabian desert opens in a gentle wash of light, where sand stretches in soft layers of warm honey color and the wind travels slowly, never in a hurry. Beneath this quiet surface, ancient stones rest just as they have for thousands of years, patient and perfectly still. There is no announcement, no grand display, only the calm presence of rock, sunlight, and time moving at its own steady rhythm. Across the northern and western deserts, stone structures appear like quiet memories placed carefully on the land, standing without effort, allowing the breeze to pass through them as it always has. Introduction into the story. As the light continues to soften across the wide Arabian desert, the land reveals itself in slow, unhurried layers. Sand does not rush here. It settles gently, building thin sheets across the ground, like pages in a very old book. The wind moves with steady patience, brushing the surface of dunes and flat plains without disturbing their calm. Beneath these quiet movements, ancient stones remain exactly where they were placed long ago, unchanged in position, softened only by time itself. There is no sound of calling across this land. No announcement marks the presence of these stones. They simply remain, fully content with their role as companions to sunlight, shadow, and passing air. Some of them emerge only slightly above the sand, their edges rounded by countless seasons of wind. Others form low circles or straight lines across open ground, so subtle they seem almost like natural patterns until one looks a little closer. In the northern and western deserts of Saudi Arabia, these stone structures appear not as monuments of spectacle, but as quiet traces of human memory laid gently upon the earth. They do not rise high against the sky. They do not seek attention. They wait patiently, allowing the wind to pass, the sun to climb and descend, and the stars to drift slowly overhead. Their presence feels steady, calm, and completely unhurried. Long before the desert took on its present form, this land experienced different rhythms. There were times when rainfall arrived more regularly, when shallow lakes shimmered beneath open skies, and when stretches of grass softened the ground between stone ridges. During those earlier ages, small groups of people moved gently across the landscape, guided by water, light, and the slow pulse of the seasons. Wherever they paused, stone became their most reliable companion, solid, cool, and endlessly available. Stones were gathered without ceremony. They were placed without haste. One stone leaned against another, forming a quiet shelter from wind. Several stones laid together marked a resting place. Over time, these modest arrangements became the earliest expressions of human structure in the region. Nothing was built for grandeur. Everything was made for calm, practical living. As centuries passed, the land continued its patient transformation. Grasslands slowly thinned. Water became more selective in where it chose to appear. The people who once crossed open plains adjusted their paths, moving along natural corridors shaped by stone, shadow, and the faint promise of moisture in dry ground. The stones they had placed remained behind, waiting in warmth and silence. From far above, these ancient arrangements resemble simple patterns, a circle here, a long straight line there, pairs of parallel stones stretching gently across open plateaus. On the ground, however, their quiet presence becomes more personal. The scale feels human. The height is low. The shapes invite slow walking and gentle observation. The stones do not overwhelm the space. They complete it. Among these formations, some resemble extended gateways made entirely of stone, long and narrow, stretching across open terrain like soft boundaries drawn upon the earth. Others form rounded enclosures, where the ground in the center lies smooth, protected by rings of rock, no taller than a seated figure. These were places of rest, of gentle gathering, of stillness beneath the open sky. Nearby traces of daily life appear. Without urgency, small stone tools, shaped by careful hands, fragments of simple pottery that once held water or grain, faint marks where warmth from ancient cooking once touched the earth. None of these signs announce themselves loudly. They are discovered only by those who walk slowly enough to notice. As the desert settled into its modern form, sand continued to drift across these sites, sometimes covering them for generations before the wind quietly revealed them again. Each movement of sand was unhurried, each return of stone equally gentle. The land did not erase what had been placed upon it. It simply folded these traces into its own long rhythm. Today, when researchers walk across these same stretches of desert, their steps follow that same calm pace. They do not rush. They observe the stones where they lie. They photograph them beneath open skies. They map their quiet relationships to one another across the plains. Nothing is removed. Nothing is hurried. The desert remains the guardian of its own memory. Around these stone structures, the desert continues its daily routines without pause. The sun rises into pale blue skies, casting long, cool shadows across rock and sand before climbing gently higher. By midday, light becomes warmer, filling every surface with soft brightness. As evening approaches, the land slowly cools, and shadows stretch once again across the quiet ground. At night, the stones release the warmth they gathered during the day. The air becomes smooth and light. The stars settle overhead without disturbance. The same stones that once supported simple shelters and resting places now share their silence with the wind, the stars, and the slow passing of countless hours. Nothing about these structures demands urgency. They do not tell dramatic stories. They do not insist on explanation. They simply remain where they were placed, continuing their long partnership with sand, air, and light. Their calm endurance becomes part of the landscape itself, as natural and steady as the rhythm of day and night. And so, as the desert rests beneath its wide sky, the ancient stones rest with it still, patient, untroubled by the passing of thousands of years. The land continues to breathe in small, quiet movements, and the stones remain exactly as they have always been, ready to accompany the journey deeper into this quiet world of time, sand, and memory. When the ancient desert was still green. Long before the desert became a desert, this land rested beneath a gentler sky. The air carried more moisture, and the ground held it quietly, allowing grasses to rise in soft green waves across open plains. Shallow lakes appeared like mirrors scattered across the earth, reflecting slow clouds drifting overhead. The rhythm of the land moved with an easy generosity, offering water, shade, and open space in calm balance. Animals traveled together in steady herds, their movements unhurried and familiar to the landscape. They followed the paths shaped naturally by grass and water, leaving behind gentle trails pressed into soft ground. The earth received these footsteps without resistance, and over time, those paths became part of the land's memory. People lived lightly within this openness. They stayed close to water sources, settling where shallow lakes shimmered or where rain gathered most reliably. Their presence did not dominate the land. It blended into it. Small groups spread out naturally, each family or community moving in calm awareness of the land's rhythms. Stone played a quiet role in these early days. It was gathered without effort, chosen not for size or perfection, but simply for usefulness. A flat surface for resting, a curved edge for shelter from the sun, a solid weight to mark a familiar place. These stones were not shaped into towering forms. They were placed gently, as if invited into position rather than forced. Over time, stones began to appear in simple arrangements, low circles pressed into the grass, short lines laid across open ground, soft boundaries that marked resting spaces without closing them off. Nothing rose high. Everything remained close to the earth, where warmth from the sun could still reach easily. As seasons repeated their gentle cycles, these early stone placements became part of daily life. A cluster of stones formed a place where people could sit and rest during the warmer hours. Another small arrangement offered shade when the sun climbed higher. Stones also served as quiet guides, simple markers, pointing the way across wide stretches of land that otherwise looked endlessly similar. Life unfolded without urgency. Mornings opened with stretched light and cool air. People moved slowly, guided by routine rather than rush. Water was collected from calm pools that reflected the sky in soft ripples. Food came from simple gathering, quiet preparation, and shared meals that followed the steady pulse of day and night. The land itself felt open and forgiving. Grass bent easily beneath the wind. The surface of shallow lakes shifted gently with each passing breeze. Stone remained firm and reliable, holding its shape while everything else moved softly around it. This contrast made stone feel comforting, like a still point in an otherwise flowing world. Animals continued their steady passages through these green spaces. Their hooves tapped lightly over stone and soil. Their silhouettes crossed the plains in slow procession. People watched without tension, seeing familiar movement repeated season after season. The presence of animals, water, grass, and stone formed a balanced picture, nothing overcrowded, nothing absent. The earliest uses of stone did not aim for permanence in the way later structures would. These stones were practical companions. They supported rest. They softened heat. They offered direction. They asked for nothing in return. Even when a group moved on with the seasons, the stones stayed behind peacefully, ready to serve again when others arrived. As thousands of years drifted by, the land began to change with remarkable patience. Rains arrived less frequently. Shallow lakes slowly shortened their visits to the surface. Grass grew thinner but continued to return, season after season, never fully surrendering its place. The transformation was so slow that it felt less like change and more like a gradual adjustment in tone. People noticed, of course, but they adjusted without urgency. Routes shifted slightly as water chose new resting places. Campgrounds moved a little closer to reliable sources. Stone circles that once sat beside lakes now rested near smaller pools. The stones themselves remained unchanged. They continued to hold their simple shapes, their soft arrangements, their quiet usefulness. With each passing generation, the landscape learned a new version of itself. Open plains stretched wider. The horizon grew more distant. Yet the relationship between people and stone stayed remarkably consistent. Stones were still placed low. They were still arranged in simple forms. They still marked rest, shelter, and gentle gathering. Even as greenery began to soften into earth tones, life remained slow and steady. The wind became drier but not harsh. The sun grew warmer but not overwhelming. Days unfolded with the same careful rhythm light, spreading across open ground, shadows sliding quietly between stones, evening returning in slow, cooling layers. The earliest stone boundaries continued to shape how people paused within the land. A low ring of rock enclosed a space just enough to make it feel distinct without separating it from everything else. A line of stones offered a soft guide between familiar places. These subtle forms gently influenced movement without ever commanding it. The land did not resist these human traces, nor did it hurry to erase them. Instead, it absorbed them into its own quiet design. Stones remained visible, paths remained suggested. The conversation between ground and structure continued without interruption. Eventually, the balance shifted further. Water became more selective in its appearances. Grass learned to grow thinner and lower. The wide green spaces began to fade into the first warm tones of emerging desert. Yet even in this transformation, nothing happened abruptly. The land simply changed its pace, not its spirit. People followed this shift with the same calm flexibility they had always practiced. They moved where water guided them. They paused where stone welcomed them. They built no large monuments. They left no towering markers. Their connections to the land remained gentle, just as they had always been. The earliest stone arrangements continued to serve their purpose. A resting place did not need to be tall to be reliable. A marker did not need to be grand to be useful. These stones performed their small roles without taking center stage, allowing the land itself to remain the main presence. As sand slowly began to appear between patches of earth and grass, the stones took on an even quieter role. They became points of stillness in an increasingly fluid surface. They held space without insisting on it. They remained calm while everything else learned new shapes. And so, from green plains to warming earth, from shallow lakes to shifting sands, the earliest chapter of life in this land unfolded with steady grace. Through it all, simple stone circles, low platforms, and gentle arrangements remained behind as quiet companions to change. They did not resist the desert as it slowly formed. They simply rested within it, carrying forward the memory of a softer landscape, where water, grass, animals, and people once moved together in unhurried balance. The stone circles of the northern plateaus. As the desert floor gradually rises toward the northern plateaus, the ground becomes firmer, flatter, and more open to the wide sky. Here, scattered across vast stone fields, thousands of stone circles rest quietly on the surface of the land. Some are nearly perfect in their round shape, as if drawn carefully with steady hands. Others stretch longer, gently oval, shaped more by practical placement than by geometry. None of them strive for height. All of them remain close to the earth. These circles appear without warning as one walks across the plateau. There is no dramatic shift in the terrain, no sudden change in color, no sign pointing ahead. One moment there is open stone and sky, and the next a low ring of rocks rests calmly at your feet. Each stone lies beside another without mortar, without binding, without urgency. The edges are softened by time. The surfaces hold the warmth of sunlight. Inside each circle, the ground is smooth and level. There is no roof above, there are no tall walls to suggest enclosure. Only the simplest boundary exists, just enough to distinguish one quiet space from the surrounding openness. The sky remains wide overhead. The wind still wanders freely in and out. These circles do not separate people from the land. They gently define a place within it. In this way, the stone circles feel less like structures and more like pauses placed thoughtfully upon the plateau. They do not ask to stand alone. They exist as part of the open rhythm of the land. Long ago, when people crossed these plateaus at a steady walking pace, the stone circles offered something quietly valuable, a place to stop without fully stopping the journey. Travelers could step into the low ring of rock, sit along its edge, and let the body rest while still remaining under open sky. There was no need to retreat from the world. The world remained present, only softened by a subtle boundary. Some of these circles likely held small gatherings, a handful of people sitting together sharing food prepared simply, passing water calmly from one to another. Nothing crowded the space. Voices stayed low. Gestures remained unhurried. The circles allowed closeness without confinement, togetherness without pressure. Others served as solitary resting places. A traveler arriving alone could settle within the stones, lean gently against their solid edges, and feel the quiet support of surfaces that had already been in place for countless seasons. The stones did not move. They did not change their shape. They offered exactly what they always had: steadiness. These were not ceremonial spaces. They were not designed for spectacle. Their purpose was comfort in motion, a soft interruption in long distances. They allowed people to sit, to eat, to wait for light to shift, to let the wind pass across warmed skin before moving on again. Even in their variety of shapes, the circles shared a consistent humility. No stone rose high. No boundary attempted to block the horizon. Each ring stayed low enough to remain part of the land, rather than something standing above it. This quiet design allowed the circles to blend naturally into the plateau, visible only when one came close enough to notice. Stone by stone, they shaped moments rather than monuments. As time passed and people continued their gentle movement across the plateaus, the stone circles multiplied gradually. A new ring appeared near an older one. Another small enclosure took shape beside a familiar path. Each addition followed the same quiet logic: low, simple, and placed with calm intention. No two circles are exactly alike. Some use larger stones along one side, as if offering a more generous backrest against the open air. Others rely on many small stones arranged carefully together. Some are wide, offering space for several people to sit comfortably. Others are narrow, fitting only one or two at a time. These variations suggest that people adapted the circles to immediate needs without rigid rules. Despite these differences, a shared rhythm ties them together. All of them remain close to the ground. All of them are easy to enter and easy to leave. None of them suggest permanence through mass or height. Their quiet consistency reflects the pace of life that once shaped them, steady, mobile, and attentive to the land. Around the circles, the plateau stretches wide and open. The surface holds a subtle texture of stone and dust. Light moves across it slowly as the sun shifts through the sky. Shadows remain low and thin, following the shape of the rocks. Without exaggeration, the atmosphere feels uncluttered, as if space itself has settled into a long, calm breath. In such surroundings, the circles feel less like destinations and more like companions to movement. They are not places one travels far to reach. They are places one encounters naturally along the way. Their presence makes the long plateau feel gently inhabited rather than empty. As centuries pass, wind carries thin layers of dust across these structures. Small grains settle between stones and along the smooth interiors. Nothing dramatic happens. The circles remain visible, only softly dusted by time's passing touch. Even after the land gradually took on drier tones, even after grasses thinned and water became more selective, the stone circles stayed where they were placed. They did not collapse. They did not vanish beneath sand all at once. Instead, they slowly adapted to the desert's new rhythm, just as the people once had. The circles continued to serve their quiet purpose whenever travelers passed through. A rest remained a rest, regardless of how the land around it changed. A gathering remained possible, even as distances between water sources grew longer. The simplicity of the circles allowed them to remain useful without adjustment. Eventually, as routes shifted and people moved in new directions, the plateau grew quieter. The stone circles waited without impatience. Wind took on the role of frequent visitor. Sunlight continued its familiar path across the sky. Nights settled cool and calm over the rocks. Stars passed overhead without interruption. Today, when one walks across these northern plateaus, the stone circles still offer the same quiet invitation to pause. They do not insist. They do not distract. They simply remain available. A person may step into one, sit for a moment, and feel the gentle logic of its design still working exactly as it always has. There is no roof to separate the sky, no tall wall to block the wind, only a low, thoughtful ring that says, in its own quiet way, that resting does not require enclosure, and that gathering does not require walls. These circles continue to do what they were always meant to do, hold small moments of stillness within wide spaces. And so the plateau breathes on, unchanged in spirit. The stone circles rest upon its surface like punctuation marks in the long sentence of the land. They pause without stopping the story. They invite without calling. They remain as gentle companions to anyone who crosses the wide northern heights at the slow, peaceful pace the desert has always preferred. The long stone gates across the desert. From high above the desert, where the land unfolds like a quiet parchment of sand and stone, a new pattern begins to appear. Long, narrow lines stretch across the surface, calm and steady, running side by side with remarkable patience. These are the stone gates, quietly resting upon the desert without lifting themselves upward. Seen from the sky, they resemble wide doorways, laid flat upon the earth, as if the land itself gently marked where time once passed through. These structures do not rise into the air. They do not cast dramatic shadows. Instead, they lie low and steady, following the natural flow of the ground. Each gate is formed by rows of stones placed in long, straight lines. The stones are carefully aligned, one beside another, without mortar, without carving, without decoration. There is only placement, repetition, and quiet consistency. Up close, the gates appear even simpler. Each stone rests in direct contact with the ground, shaped only by natural edges and softened by years of sun and wind. The lines they form do not curve dramatically. They stretch forward with calm assurance, guiding the eye gently along their length and across the wide openness of the desert floor. The gates do not seem to interrupt the landscape. They move with it. Sand slips between the stones. Light drifts across their surfaces without pause. The land accepts them as part of its long story. Unlike buildings designed to shelter or enclose, these stone gates seem content to remain open at all times. There is nothing to pass through in the usual sense. No threshold rises. No roof marks the moment of entry. Instead, the gate exists as a suggestion, a soft indication of direction, rather than a command to follow it. Long ago, people moving across the desert would have encountered these lines as quiet companions on their journeys. The gates did not block movement. They did not force a path. They simply rested there, offering subtle guidance across wide, open terrain, where every direction could easily look the same. In a land where distance unfolds generously, the presence of parallel lines gently eased the task of navigation. The stones that form these gates were not chosen for beauty. They were chosen for availability. They were lifted by simple hands, placed with measured care, and aligned with steady attention. There was no rush in their construction. Each stone found its place without drama. Each line grew gradually, extending farther across the land with each addition. Nothing about these structures suggests grandeur. Their purpose lies entirely in their quiet precision. The desert itself provides the scale. Against such vastness, even structures hundreds of meters long appear humble and low. The gates do not compete with the horizon. They remain companions to it. As sunlight shifts throughout the day, the gates absorb warmth and release it slowly. In the early morning, they appear cool and pale. By midday, they hold a gentle heat beneath the hand. In the evening, they glow softly, with the last traces of light before returning once again to stillness. What makes the stone gates especially remarkable is how little they have changed. Thousands of years have passed across their surfaces, yet their form remains steady. Wind has moved countless grains of sand across them. Heat and cold have taken turns upon their edges. Still, the lines continue to hold their shape with quiet reliability. There is no sign of collapse, no evidence of hurried repair. These gates were made simply, but simplicity has proven to be their strength. Without joints to weaken or decorations to erode, they endure through the steady patience of placement alone. Around them, the desert continues its slow choreography. Sand drifts and settles. Small stones roll a short distance and come to rest. The color of the land shifts with the light. Yet the gates remain where they always have been, neither resisting change nor being overtaken by it. Their parallel lines gently echo the quiet order of the land itself. The desert does not rush. The gates do not rush. The relationship feels balanced and effortless, as though both have agreed to move through time at the same comfortable pace. Travelers who pass near these gates today often do so slowly, even without intending to. The long, straight lines invite the eye forward in a calm, unhurried way. Walking beside them feels steady and measured. There is no sense of urgency, only the gentle continuation of movement from one step to the next. Even when no one is nearby, the gates remain strangely active in their stillness. Light moves along them. Shadows trace their edges. Wind passes between their stones without resistance. They are never truly idle. They participate constantly in the quiet life of the desert. As distances grew longer and routes slowly changed over generations, the stone gates remained in place. They did not follow the shifting paths of people. Instead, the paths found new relationships to them. Some routes passed directly alongside their lines. Others crossed them at soft angles. In every case, the gates offered gentle reference points in wide, open space. Eventually, as regions grew quieter and movement thinned across certain parts of the desert, the gates became watchers of stillness rather than companions to traffic. They observed only wind, sky, and passing shadows. Their long lines continued to stretch across emptiness without needing to lead anyone anywhere. From the air, modern observers now see these gates clearly again. What once guided quiet foot travel now guides quiet curiosity from above. Yet the gates themselves remain unchanged by attention. They do not become louder with discovery. They do not alter their presence in response to being observed. They simply continue to rest where they were placed. The stones neither announce their age nor conceal it. They wear time gently, like a familiar garment that grows softer rather than thinner. Each year adds another thin layer of warmth, dust, and light to their surfaces. Each night cools them back into quiet neutrality. And so, as the desert breathes slowly beneath the sky, the long stone gates continue their silent partnership with the land. They do not open or close. They do not invite or refuse. They remain as calm lines drawn across a vast canvas of sand and stone, unchanged in form, unchanged in purpose, quietly keeping their place in the world without ever demanding attention. Hegra and the stones, carved into the mountain. As the land gently transitions from open plateaus into rising stone formations, the desert begins to change its posture. Here, stone does not lie scattered across the ground in quiet circles or long lines. Instead, it rises upward, forming broad sandstone cliffs warmed by centuries of soft sunlight. In this landscape, stone is no longer only arranged on the surface. It is shaped directly from the mountains themselves. At Hegra, the cliffs appear calm and steady, their faces smoothed by wind and time. Into these sandstone walls, openings were carefully carved. Flat surfaces emerge from curved rock. Rectangular doorways appear with precise edges. The mountain becomes both wall and shelter, both surface and space. The carvings do not break the silence of the desert. They extend it inward. As one steps closer to these openings, the bright desert light begins to soften. Sunlight no longer strikes directly. It filters gently through the carved entrances, spreading into the interior with a quiet, even glow. The stone absorbs the heat and releases it slowly, creating air that feels cool and steady. Inside, temperature remains calm and balanced. The warmth of the desert does not rush in. The coolness of the stone does not press outward. Everything settles into a gentle middle ground where the air feels reliable and unhurried, just as the mountain itself has always been. The spaces carved into the sandstone unfold with simplicity. Walls are smooth, where tools once moved with slow, steady hands. Corners meet neatly at soft right angles. Floors remain level beneath the feet, worn only slightly by the passage of long time. These interiors do not stretch endlessly. They offer just enough space for rest, storage, and quiet gathering. Light enters gradually. It does not flood the rooms. It arrives in slow layers, tracing gentle patterns across stone surfaces as the sun moves its patient arc through the sky. Morning light brushes the edges of the doorways. Midday brightness reaches farther into the interior. Evening light retreats quietly, leaving behind a soft afterglow that fades without urgency. Shadows follow the same calm rhythm. They slide slowly along the walls without sharp contrast. There is no sudden darkness. Everything changes by degrees. The stone moderates all movement of light and temperature, creating an atmosphere where time feels softened rather than measured. Within these carved spaces, sound also behaves differently. The wind outside becomes distant. Footsteps echo gently, then settle. Voices, if present, would remain low and smooth, guided naturally by the stone to stay quiet. The interior absorbs sharpness and returns only calm. These spaces were not carved for spectacle. They were shaped for steadiness. The sandstone offers its quiet strength without display. It does not shimmer or glitter. It rests in warm earth tones that shift subtly with the day's light, always returning to balance. The act of carving into stone required patience rather than force. Each surface was shaped slowly, following the grain of the rock instead of resisting it. Tools moved in measured strokes, removing stone gently, one careful pass at a time. Over long periods, solid walls gave way to open spaces, and the mountain learned new shapes without losing its calm presence. What remains most striking is not how much stone was removed, but how much was left behind. The mountain still stands as the dominant form. The carved spaces never overpower it. They exist within its mass like quiet rooms within a larger body, protected by the depth of stone on all sides. This relationship between space and stone creates a steady feeling of shelter. The mountain does not close in, it supports. Its weight feels reassuring rather than heavy. The thickness of the walls keeps temperatures even and the sounds of the desert distant. Outside, sunlight continues its familiar routine across the cliffs. Birds cross the sky in brief arcs. Wind moves gently along the rock faces. Inside, the air remains calm. The contrast between outer movement and inner stillness feels natural, as though both belong to the same, larger rhythm. Even after generations passed, these carved spaces continued to serve quietly. They did not need constant alteration. Stone required little maintenance. It stood patiently, asking only to remain where it was. As time moved forward and the land beyond Hegra gradually adopted drier tones, the carved spaces remained unchanged in their essential nature. The desert learned new shades of color. The sky continued its daily passage. Yet the interior of the mountain held its calm temperature and gentle light, unaffected by the wider transformations. When fewer people passed through, the carved rooms did not empty in a dramatic way. They simply grew quieter. Wind carried fine grains of sand to their thresholds. Light still entered in slow, familiar patterns. The stone continued to breathe softly, with the rhythms of day and night. Today, when one stands before these carved openings, the mountain appears exactly as it always has, steady, unhurried, and quietly accommodating. The flat surfaces remain smooth beneath the hand. The rectangular doorways still frame the sky beyond with gentle precision. The cool interior air still waits just inside the threshold. There is no sense of urgency within these spaces. Time does not feel compressed here. It feels wide and patient. The temperature does not argue with the season. The light does not hurry across the walls. The shadows do not rush toward darkness. Everything seems content to move at the pace the mountain has always preferred. And so, at Hegra, stone achieves its most inward expression. It is no longer only a boundary laid upon the surface or a line drawn across the land. It becomes space itself, cool, quiet, and steady. The mountain does not speak, it does not guide. It simply offers a calm interior, where light arrives gently, shadows rest evenly, and the world outside continues its slow movement under the wide desert sky. Everyday traces around the stones. Around the low stone circles and modest rock arrangements, small and quiet traces of daily life rest gently in the earth. Nothing grand rises from the ground. There are no towering walls, no wide streets, no signs of crowded cities. Instead, the land offers subtler clues, fragments of pottery, smooth stone tools, and the faint remains of ancient hearths where warmth once gathered. These traces do not announce themselves loudly. A curved piece of clay lies half buried in the dust. A rounded stone tool rests exactly where it was last set down. Darkened patches of earth mark places where small fires once burned slowly and evenly. Together, these signs form a calm picture of simple living shaped by movement, season, and quiet routine. The people who left these traces did not settle in one place permanently. They moved with the rhythm of water. When seasonal rains arrived and shallow pools returned to the land, small groups gathered nearby. When water slowly withdrew, they followed its gentle retreat without haste. Their presence was light, their stays brief, their impact small. Stone played a consistent role in this mobile life. It was always close to the ground, always within reach. Low stone edges blocked just enough wind to make resting comfortable. Flat rock surfaces offered places to sit, to prepare food, to place tools and pottery within easy reach. Nothing needed to rise high to be useful. Life unfolded close to the earth. Every movement stayed within arm's length of stone, sand, and grass. This closeness created a daily rhythm that felt grounded and steady, never rushed, never crowded. Pottery fragments found near these stone circles suggest vessels made for everyday needs. Their shapes are simple and rounded, designed to hold water, grain, or small portions of food. Some pieces show faint marks where hands once pressed gently into wet clay. Others carry subtle patterns made without haste, repeating small motions until the surface felt complete. These vessels were not made for display. They were made to be lifted easily, to rest comfortably on flat stone, to travel short distances without trouble. When they broke, their fragments settled back into the earth, quietly, becoming part of the same landscape they once served. Stone tools appear alongside them with equal humility. Smooth-edged cutters, rounded grinders, and compact implements shaped by patient hands lie nearby. Their surfaces show the gentle polish of repeated use, not from urgency but from consistency. Each tool performed a small task again and again until it felt familiar in the hand. The hearths tell an equally gentle story. Fires burned low and steady, not large or dramatic. Heat gathered in the center of stone arrangements and spread outward slowly. Food warmed quietly. Light flickered softly against nearby rock surfaces. When the fire settled into glowing embers, it left behind only faint traces of warmth pressed into the ground. These hearths were places of calm focus rather than spectacle. Cooking did not fill the air with excitement. It followed a steady rhythm shaped by routine, shared space, and the slow arrival of night. Together, pottery, tools, and hearths form a picture of daily life measured by small actions rather than large events. Each object reflects a lifestyle that valued portability, balance, and comfort over permanence or display. The absence of large settlements near these stone circles speaks softly but clearly. There are no signs of streets layered with many footsteps, no foundations of heavy structures pressed deep into the ground. Instead, everything suggests small groups moving gently across the land in harmony with seasonal change. These groups gathered when water returned and dispersed when it withdrew. Their stays were long enough to rest, to cook, to share quiet moments together, yet short enough to leave the land much as they found it. The stone circles served as temporary anchors rather than permanent addresses. Within these simple camps, the arrangement of stone remained practical and modest. Windbreaks stayed low, just high enough to soften the breeze without blocking the open view of sky. Seating edges formed naturally along curved stones. Tools and vessels rested close by, placed within easy reach and easy movement. At night, the stone continued its role without effort. It absorbed the warmth from hearth fires and released it slowly into the surrounding air. The space around the stones remained gently warm while the wider desert cooled. This quiet exchange of heat unfolded without ceremony, guided only by the natural properties of rock and fire. Morning returned with equal calm. Light slid across stone surfaces. Shadows retreated without hurry. People gathered their few belongings, set down what they no longer needed, and followed the day's direction, dictated by water and weather. Even when a group moved on, the stones did not appear abandoned. They simply waited. Tools might be taken forward. Pottery might be carried carefully away. The hearth would settle into cool ash. The stone circle would remain unchanged, ready to offer the same quiet service again. Over many generations, the repetition of these small activities created a subtle layering of presence around the stones. One group followed another, separated by seasons or years, each leaving behind a few gentle traces before moving on. The land absorbed these moments without needing to display them prominently. The stones themselves continued their role with remarkable consistency. Always low, always steady, always offering just enough shelter from wind, just enough support for resting bodies, just enough surface for setting down daily tools and vessels. They never demanded maintenance. They never asked to be rebuilt. Their simplicity allowed them to endure without effort. As the climate slowly shifted and the land grew drier, this pattern of movement became even more essential. Groups followed water with greater attentiveness. Time spent near each stone circle became shorter, but no less meaningful. The rhythms of daily life adjusted gently rather than abruptly. Eventually, as routes changed and fewer people passed regularly through certain regions, the stones experienced longer periods of quiet. Yet even in stillness, they continued to carry the memory of hands resting, tools placed, pots warmed, and small fires glowing. Today, when researchers find these traces, pottery fragments, stone tools, and faint hearth remains, they do not see signs of crowded towns or fixed cities. They see something softer, the evidence of mobile communities shaped by seasons, water, and practicality, rather than permanence. The stones remain exactly where they were placed millennia ago, still low to the earth, still wide enough to block the wind, still flat enough to hold what needs holding. They do not tell stories loudly. They do not display their age proudly. They simply continue to offer the same quiet usefulness they always have. And so, around these stones, the memory of everyday life lingers, not as memory carved in walls, but as memory resting gently in dust, in fragments, in softened edges and faint ash. It is the memory of people who moved lightly across the land, carrying only what they needed and leaving behind just enough to show that they were once there, moving calmly with the slow, patient rhythm of the desert. Wind, sand, and the slow art of wearing stone. In the desert, the wind never arrives as a forceful guest. It does not announce itself loudly, and it does not hurry. It moves with an untroubled pace, gliding low across open ground, slipping between stones, brushing the surface of rock as gently as a passing hand. The wind does not break the stone. It does not shatter it. The wind simply stays with it, year after year, performing the same quiet motion with endless patience. Each year, a thin veil of dust settles across the stones. It is so light that it barely changes their shape, only softening their color by a shade so small that the difference is felt more than seen. A surface that once held a sharper edge grows rounder by the smallest degree. A faint scratch left long ago becomes smoother, as though it were learning to relax. The desert does not rush its work. There's no sudden transformation. Instead, change arrives grain by grain, layer by layer, moment by moment. The stones accept this treatment without resistance. They remain steady, allowing time to do what time prefers to do. Standing among these rocks, one begins to notice how nothing here feels rushed. Wind moves at a comfortable speed. Dust settles without urgency. The stones themselves remain firm and patient, participating in a relationship that has been unfolding for thousands of years with no need for haste. As seasons pass, the wind repeats the same small gestures. It lifts fine sand from the ground and carries it lightly through the air. The grains drift until they meet stone once again. Then they rest. Some settle deep within narrow crevices. Others slide along flat surfaces before finding a gentle stillness at the base of a rock. With every passing year, the smallest details change by the smallest amounts. A corner that once felt crisp beneath the fingertips now feels gently rounded. A ridge that once formed a precise line now forms a softer curve. The stone does not lose itself in this process. It simply adopts a quieter version of its original shape. From a distance, the stones appear unchanged. From up close, Their surfaces tell a different story, one written not in sudden marks, but in gradual transitions. Lines soften, shadows blur at the edges, color shifts slightly, from brighter tones to deeper, warmer shades that hold sunlight with a calmer glow. This process carries a certain quiet humor too, as though the desert were patiently teaching the stones how to relax. Even the most stubborn edge eventually smooths out. The wind never argues, it never insists. It simply returns again and again, continuing its gentle work with remarkable consistency. Nothing about this wearing down feels like destruction. It feels more like a slow polishing, as though the stone were being prepared to rest even more comfortably within its surroundings. Time in the desert does not arrive in large steps. It arrives in countless tiny ones. A single year places a barely visible layer of dust across the stone. A century adds only a slightly deeper softness. 1,000 years brings warmth into the surface color and ease into the contours. The stone does not suddenly appear old. It simply grows calmer in how it holds itself. This is why the stones of the desert never seem to age dramatically. There are no sharp lines that suddenly erode away. There is no single crack that announces a turning point. Instead, everything changes by subtle degrees that only become noticeable when viewed across long stretches of time. The wind continues its quiet routine regardless of season. In warmer months, it carries finer dust. In cooler months, it flows with a steadier weight. In all cases, it behaves with the same unhurried patience. It touches every exposed surface without preference. It leaves no corner completely untouched, yet it never overstays its welcome. Even the shadows cast by the stones follow this slow rhythm of transformation. As edges round and surfaces mellow, the shadows become softer too. They spread more evenly across the ground, losing the sharp contrast of earlier forms. Light and dark learn to blend with quieter transitions. At ground level, the dialogue between wind, sand, and stone continues without interruption. Small dunes appear and disappear. Fine trails of sand gather at the base of rocks and vanish again with the next passing breeze. The stones remain unaffected in purpose, altered only in texture and tone. Over the longest spans of time, what emerges is not the image of stone being defeated, but the image of stone settling into its final balanced form. What once may have appeared angular becomes comfortably rounded. What once reflected sunlight brightly now reflects it softly. The stone does not lose its presence. It gains a gentler one. This slow transformation explains why the ancient stone structures of the desert do not appear fragile despite their age. They have been shaped not by sudden stress, but by continuous care from the elements. The wind has learned their surface. The sand has memorized their curves. The sun has warmed them into rich, steady hues. In this way, the stones grow older without ever seeming tired. They are not worn out. They are worn in as though they have learned exactly how to fit into the land that holds them. Each softened edge is a quiet record of patience. Each mellowed surface is a reminder that change does not need to arrive loudly to be complete. As the desert continues its daily rhythm of warm mornings, bright afternoons, and cool evenings, The stones remain exactly where they have always been. The wind passes over them. Dust rests upon them. Light moves across them. And through it all, the stones simply continue their long partnership with time. They do not rush toward age. They do not resist it. They allow it to arrive at its own pace, one grain of sand at a time, one layer of dust at a time, one softened corner at a time. And so, under the steady breath of the desert, the stones quietly demonstrate how change can be both slow and kind, leaving behind not signs of loss, but signs of gentle becoming. The gentle rhythm of ancient life beside stone. In the ancient desert, the day begins without any sense of urgency. People wake with the light, not because a clock calls them, but because the sky quietly shifts from deep blue to pale gold. The first glow spreads slowly across the sand, touching stone surfaces one by one, as if greeting them in a careful line. Eyes open without hurry, bodies stretch without demand. Another calm day simply arrives. Movement follows the shadow rather than the hour. As the sun climbs gradually, people adjust their paths with gentle attention. They walk where the ground feels cooler beneath the feet. They follow the longer reach of shade cast by low stones and shallow rock formations. No one needs to hurry. Distance is measured in comfort rather than speed. By mid-morning, the light grows warmer, shadows shorten, sand becomes brighter. At this point, people naturally slow their pace. They settle near stones that hold the night's coolness a little longer. Sitting close to rock feels like sitting beside a patient companion who offers quiet support without conversation. The stone does not rush the day forward. It simply stays steady, allowing the motion of life to settle around it with ease. By midday, the rhythm gently shifts again. The sun rests high above the land. Light stands almost directly overhead. This is the time when people pause beside stone most willingly. The rocks offer a low edge to lean against, a flat surface to sit upon, a calm boundary that softens the wide openness of the desert without enclosing it. Here, the living space always remains low. There are no tall structures rising upward. No walls reach far above the body. Everything remains close to the earth, where warmth and shade can still be shared evenly. Life unfolds at ground level, within easy reach of sand, stone, and the gentle breath of wind. Tools are placed nearby within arm's length. Water vessels rest where the hand naturally falls. Food is prepared quietly on flat stone surfaces. Nothing is stacked high, nothing is stored far away. Every object remains part of the same close, grounded arrangement. Even sound stays low. Voices carry softly across the open ground without echo. Laughter, if it appears, drifts gently away rather than bouncing back. The desert receives sound and sets it down without excitement. The stone continues to help shape this calm midday pause. It blocks just enough wind, it reflects just enough light, it supports just enough weight for resting bodies. It does all of this without calling attention to itself. As afternoon settles in, the sun begins its slow descent. Shadows lengthen again. The land cools gradually rather than suddenly. Activity resumes in unhurried steps. People move gently across the sand, guided once more by shade and comfort. Footsteps press softly into dry sand. Each step leaves a temporary mark that the wind will soon smooth away. There is no sense of permanence in these prints. Movement is light, deliberate, and calm. The ground records each step briefly, then lets it go. The wind moves in steady, patient lines across the land. It touches the stones with a quiet brushing sound. It passes through open spaces between rock edges. It lifts thin grains of sand and sets them down again without disturbance. This soft dialogue between wind and stone continues without interruption. Nearby stone surfaces warm and cool in slow cooperation with the sky. The heat of midday releases gently into the air. The rock never grows too warm. The air never grows too heavy. Everything stays balanced in small degrees. People move easily within this atmosphere. They gather what they need. They adjust their paths as shadows shift. They follow the land's signals rather than trying to direct it. Movement feels like a quiet agreement between body and ground. As the evening approaches, the pace naturally softens once more. The sky fades from pale blue into warm amber tones. The stones that held the day's warmth now release it slowly into the cooling air. Sitting beside them becomes comfortable again. The ground settles into a calm neutrality between heat and cool. The living space remains low to the earth as it always has. No tall silhouettes rise against the horizon. No structures cast long, commanding shadows. Everything rests near the surface, where light, air, and stone continue their quiet exchange. The familiar sounds of the desert return in softened form. Footsteps grow fewer. The wind slows slightly as temperatures shift. The brushing of air against rock becomes smoother, deeper, more even. Sand no longer moves as freely. It rests more willingly as the night approaches. People sit near the stones once more. Tools are set down neatly. Water vessels rest in familiar places. The stones hold these objects with steady reliability. Nothing tips, nothing shifts unexpectedly. The ground feels stable, calm, and predictable beneath every motion. With darkness slowly settling across the land, the ancient rhythm completes another gentle cycle. Waking followed the light. Movement followed the shadow. Rest returned beside the stone at midday and again at evening. No step needed to be fast. No moment needed to be forced. And so, day after day, season after season, the life beside stone unfolded in slow cooperation with light, wind, sand, and ground. The stones never directed this rhythm. They simply supported it quietly, steadily, and without interruption, while the desert continued to offer wide space for small, unhurried lives to move gently within it. Ancient roots crossing the desert. Across the wide desert, the land appears endless at first glance, yet movement has always followed gentle order. Ancient roots stretch quietly between distant horizons, not as paved roads or marked paths, but as softly remembered directions shaped by water, grass, and time. Near many stone sites, these old roots pass by naturally, as though the stones themselves chose their resting places alongside the steady flow of travel. These roots did not follow straight lines for the sake of speed. They curved gently with the land, adjusting their course according to where water appeared most reliably and where small patches of grass returned after seasonal rains. Travelers did not rush across these distances. They moved at a pace that matched the land's ability to support them. Water guided each decision. When shallow pools gathered after rainfall, the roots drifted closer to these calm mirrors of the sky. When the land dried again, the paths quietly shifted without complaint. The desert never demanded a fixed direction. It offered suggestions instead, and people followed them with steady patience. The stones placed along these routes took on a gentle secondary role. They became small reference points in open space. A low circle signaled a familiar resting place. A short line of rocks suggested where others had once paused before continuing onward. Nothing stood tall. Everything remained close to the surface, easily noticed without interrupting the wide openness of the desert. Travel felt less like crossing distance and more like accompanying the land as it gradually unfolded forward. As travelers moved along these routes, the stone sites offered something quietly essential, a place to ease the rhythm without stopping it entirely. After long hours of walking beneath open sky, a cluster of stones appeared like a gentle invitation to slow down. Here, the wind softened slightly. The sand felt firmer beneath resting feet. The air seemed to pause just long enough to allow bodies to settle comfortably. Water vessels were set down carefully on flat stone surfaces. Tools rested where hands could reach them easily. The warmth absorbed by the stones during the day released itself slowly, offering a subtle comfort as evening approached. These moments of pause were not dramatic interruptions. They were natural commas in the long sentence of travel. Movement between these resting points followed a steady cycle. Walk, pause, sit, rise, and walk again. The land never rushed the sequence, and travelers never felt pressed to hurry it along. Each rest felt earned without requiring effort. Each departure felt natural without needing encouragement. The routes also connected small groups of people scattered across the desert. Encounters happened gently at these stone resting points. A few travelers might arrive from one direction while others approached from another. They shared space easily without crowding it. A quiet exchange of presence occurred before movement resumed in separate directions. No one lingered too long. No one felt pushed away. The flow continued smoothly, guided by daylight, shadow, water, and the calm logic of distance. Over many generations, these routes became deeply familiar without ever being formalized. They were not carved into the earth with force. Instead, they formed through repetition, patience, and quiet agreement between people and land. Footsteps pressed lightly into the sand and were erased by wind soon after. The path remained not as a mark on the ground, but as a memory in movement. The stones scattered near these routes became the most dependable markers. Sand could shift, grass could fade, water could wander from place to place, but stone remained where it was placed. Its calm permanence made it a reliable companion to travelers who crossed the same region season after season. A single standing rock might indicate a familiar curve in the route. A low stone ring might suggest a safe place to pause for the night. A cluster of stones near a shallow rise could mean that water was often found nearby after rain. Each marker spoke quietly without words, guiding movement without commanding it. Even when routes gradually shifted over long spans of time, the stones adjusted their role with equal grace. A resting place might become less frequently visited, but it never lost its readiness. A marker might see fewer travelers pass by, but it never stopped offering orientation to those who happened upon it. The desert learned to remember these paths in its own way. Even when no one walked them for a time, the land kept their general direction within its wide, patient form. In later years, as climate continued its slow transformation and travel patterns changed further, Some routes grew quieter. Fewer footsteps passed daily. Longer distances separated familiar resting points. Yet the logic of movement remained remarkably consistent. Water still guided direction. Grass still encouraged brief pauses. Stone still offered quiet steadiness. Even today, when one stands near these ancient stone sites, the sense of passage remains woven into the land. The space feels neither abandoned nor busy. It feels prepared, ready to receive movement whenever it arrives. The stones do not insist on being noticed. They simply remain available, just as they always have. The desert itself continues to offer long corridors of open space. Light travels freely across these corridors from morning to evening. Wind traces the same slow lines across sand and rock. The stones near the old routes still hold their position, unbothered by whether they are actively guiding travelers or merely resting in stillness. And so, the ancient routes continue their quiet existence within the desert, not as visible highways, but as gently remembered directions that follow water, grass, and seasonal rain. The stones along these routes remain what they have always been: markers that do not command, resting points that do not detain, and companions to travel that ask for nothing more than to remain where they are. Movement comes and goes. Stillness returns and waits patiently. The land allows both to exist together without urgency. And in this slow cooperation between path and pause, between distance and rest, the ancient rhythm of desert travel continues to breathe quietly beneath the wide, open sky. When the climate slowly changed. Over many long seasons, the rhythm of rain begins to change its timing. Showers that once arrived regularly now pause a little longer between visits. The land notices quietly. Grass still grows, but it grows lower and more carefully. Shallow pools still appear after rainfall, but they remain for shorter stretches of time before slipping back into the earth. People adjust with the same calm patience they have always practiced. When the rains arrive, they gather near familiar stone circles as they always have. When the water begins to withdraw sooner than expected, they follow its gentle retreat without concern. Their paths grow longer by small degrees, stretching slightly farther each season in search of the same steady balance they once found closer at hand. The movement feels gradual rather than sudden. No one wakes to find the landscape transformed overnight. Instead, change arrives like a soft whisper, repeated many times until it becomes the new tone of the land. Grass that once bent easily beneath the breeze now grows in thinner clusters. Open ground expands slowly between patches of green. Still, the stone circles remain part of this shifting pattern. They are not abandoned abruptly. They continue to be visited whenever the seasons bring enough rain to invite return. A familiar resting place still feels welcoming even when visits grow less frequent. The land stretches a little farther between pauses. The rhythm slows slightly, yet nothing feels disrupted. Everything simply learns a wider version of its old pattern. As the years continue their steady passing, journeys between water sources become longer and more measured. People walk a little farther before pausing. They rise a little earlier in the morning. They settle a little closer to shade when midday arrives. These are quiet adjustments made without announcement, guided entirely by comfort and observation. The stone circles still welcome these pauses. Their low edges block the wind just enough Their flat surfaces still hold tools and vessels with the same dependable balance. Even when water becomes more distant, the stones perform their role without change. They remain ready whenever someone arrives. Visits begin to follow a gentler seasonal rhythm. During times of better rain, familiar routes see more frequent movement. During drier stretches, the land grows quieter. The circles wait without impatience through both conditions. They do not keep count of footsteps. They do not measure absence as loss. They simply remain what they have always been available. Over time, the distance between visits grows longer. A circle that once welcomed people every season may now see them only once in several years. Yet when someone does return, the stone feels unchanged. The surface may hold a thicker layer of dust. The edges may feel slightly more rounded, but the sense of rest remains exactly as it was before. The land around the circles slowly adopts warmer, drier tones. The sky remains wide. The wind continues its steady movement. The stones accept each new version of the desert with the same calm presence they have always offered. Eventually, a quiet shift occurs in which wind becomes the most frequent visitor to many of these stone sites. Rains still arrive on occasion, but they come less often. Grass still returns, but in smaller, more careful patches. The land grows accustomed to longer spells of stillness between these brief renewals. Wind begins to move more freely across open ground. It travels in soft, repetitive patterns, lifting thin veils of sand and laying them down again without urgency. The stone circles receive these gentle visits day after day. Fine dust gathers within their low boundaries. The interiors grow softer underfoot as the sand settles. This ongoing exchange between wind and stone feels peaceful rather than erasing. The circles do not disappear suddenly beneath drifting sand. They remain visible through their low outlines and familiar shapes. The sand simply adds another quiet layer to their long story. At times, the wind passes through empty circles that no longer host frequent rest. It traces their curves with invisible hands. It moves across their flat centers and then continues on its way. The circles remain unchanged in purpose even when their visitors change. Sound becomes simpler here. The quiet brushing of air against stone, the faint shifting of sand at ground level, the deep silence of open desert between morning and night. These sounds replace the gentle activity of people, without altering the calm nature of the space. With the passing of many generations, the role of these stone circles completes another calm transition. They move from being frequent companions of travel to becoming quiet observers of open land. They are not forgotten in any dramatic sense. They are simply visited by different rhythms now. The wind becomes their most loyal guest. It arrives without schedule and leaves without ceremony. It smooths the sand within the circles. It cools the stone at night and warms it gently during the day through the movement of air. The sun continues to trace its familiar arc above them, and the shadows still move slowly across their low edges. Occasionally, a traveler still arrives, guided by water, memory, or the gentle suggestion of the land. The stones receive this rare visit with the same quiet steadiness they once offered daily. No greeting is needed, no explanation is required. Rest unfolds naturally once more. In this way, the stone circles do not experience abandonment as an ending. They experience it as a widening of time between moments. The land does not remove them. The sand does not erase them. The wind does not disturb them. All three simply learn to share space with greater stillness. As climate continues its slow, patient shift, the desert adopts longer pauses between gatherings of water and grass. People move farther between these points of renewal. The circles remain behind, waiting without tension, holding their shape across the widening distances. And so when rain grows rare and visits grow fewer, the final steady relationship remains between stone and wind. The circles continue to rest in open space. The wind continues to pass through them. The sun continues to warm their surfaces. Change arrives not as a sudden turning, but as a gentle stretching of time itself. Everything becomes quieter. Everything becomes slower. Nothing truly disappears. It simply learns to wait with the same unhurried patience that the desert has always practiced. The stone sites in the quiet rhythm of modern archaeology. In the present day, the desert still receives visitors, but their pace has changed in a gentle way. Researchers arrive not with haste, but with careful steps that match the calm of the land. Their boots press lightly into the sand. Their movements follow the same slow logic the desert has always preferred. They walk across the plateaus with steady attention, pausing at each stone circle and each low arrangement of rock. One by one, they mark every position with quiet precision. A note is written, a coordinate is recorded. A simple flag or marker is placed nearby without disturbing the stones themselves. There is no rush to dig, no hurry to lift or remove. The stones remain exactly where they have always been. The work unfolds as observation rather than intervention. The researchers move as guests rather than owners, adapting their pace to the silence around them. Their presence adds a new layer to the long story of the desert. For thousands of years, people paused beside these stones to rest and gather. Now people pause beside them again, but this time to observe, to measure, and to understand without interruption. The rhythm remains slow. Only the purpose has shifted slightly. The desert responds to this new role with the same patience it has always shown. Wind continues to pass across open ground. Sunlight continues to slide across stone surfaces. The stones themselves remain steady, unbothered by attention, unaltered by being seen. The process of modern documentation feels almost ceremonial in its gentleness. Each stone circle is approached from the outer edge rather than crossed immediately. The interior space is viewed carefully before any step is taken. Shadows are watched as they move across the ground to understand how light interacts with the structure throughout the day. Photographs are taken slowly, not in bursts, but in measured moments. A lens captures the way dust has settled between stones. Another records the curve of a rounded edge shaped by centuries of wind. Nothing is adjusted for a better view. The purpose is to see the stone as it truly is, not as one might wish it to appear. The recording of positions becomes a quiet map layered across the desert. Each circle, each line of stone, each low cluster receives a place on this invisible grid of memory. Yet the land itself does not feel segmented by this mapping. It remains open, continuous, and wide, just as it always has been. Importantly, nothing is taken apart. There is no dismantling to see what lies beneath. The stones stay in their long-standing arrangements. The sand remains undisturbed except for the light pressure of footsteps that the wind soon smooths away. This practice reflects a new kind of respect that feels very much in harmony with the ancient rhythm of the place. The goal is not to awaken what has been resting, it is simply to notice what is already present. In this way, the stones are not startled into new meaning. They are allowed to remain what they. The tools of modern archaeology also move quietly across the desert. Measuring tapes stretch and retract with soft sounds. Small handheld devices glow briefly before darkening again. Notes are made without urgency. Nothing clicks loudly. Nothing echoes across the open land. Sometimes a researcher pauses not to record, but simply to sit beside a stone circle as earlier travelers once did. The same low edge offers rest. The same flat surface supports the same quiet pause. The role of the stone does not change even as centuries pass between its visitors. Temperature remains steady near the rocks. The heat of the day is softened by stone that has learned long ago how to absorb and release warmth slowly. The cool of the evening gathers in the same calm way. Modern observers notice this with quiet appreciation, though the stone itself feels no need to demonstrate its skill. The act of preservation unfolds as a practice of patience rather than control. Instead of restoring stones to previous appearances, the focus rests on keeping them exactly as they are. Their softened edges, their dusted surfaces, their subtle variations in color, are accepted as part of their long identity. The desert remains the primary steward. Wind continues its slow polishing. Sunlight continues its daily journey. Sand continues its gentle drifting. Human presence does not interrupt these processes. It simply acknowledges them. In this environment, modern research becomes another form of quiet companionship rather than an attempt to command the land. As the days of observation pass, the stone sites settle back into their familiar stillness between visits. Researchers come and go according to calm schedules. Their markers remain minimal. Their footsteps fade quickly beneath layers of moving sand. The stones themselves never experience abrupt attention. They are not suddenly crowded by large gatherings. They do not become stages for spectacle. Their introduction to the modern world is as soft as the desert wind that first shaped their surfaces. When no one is present, the sites return easily to silence. The land does not seem altered by having been studied. The stones do not seem burdened by having been recorded. Everything resumes its steady pattern of light, shadow, warmth, and cool. At night, the same stars look down upon the same low circles and long lines of stone. The same quiet darkness settles across familiar edges. The desert does not distinguish between ancient travelers who once rested here and modern observers who now measure and note. All participate in the same slow breathing of the land. What makes this modern rhythm remarkable is not what it changes, but what it preserves. The stones remain undisturbed. The desert remains primary. The work remains light enough to leave the long silence intact. And so, within the gentle pace of contemporary archaeology, the stone sites continue their long rest without awakening. They are seen without being stirred. They are mapped without being moved. They remain where they have always been, steady companions to wind, sand, and time. In this final quiet exchange between past and present, nothing is taken away. Nothing is forced forward. The stones keep their calm identity as the desert keeps its wide stillness, and the act of observation becomes just another slow step within the unbroken rhythm the land has practiced for thousands of years. A closing as soft as the night sand. As night slowly settles over the Arabian desert, the stones begin their quiet transition into coolness. They release the warmth of the day in unhurried breaths, one gentle moment after another. The air softens. The sharp brightness of sunlight fades into smooth shades of dusk. What remains is a calm, steady atmosphere that feels neither warm nor cold, but comfortably balanced in between. The wind grows thinner and more even, no longer moving in playful afternoon waves, but in long, slow lines that slide across the surface of sand and stone. It no longer lifts grains into little dances. Instead, it simply glides, brushing along the ground with barely a whisper. The desert responds by becoming still in a deeper way, as if it too has decided to rest. Far across the open land, the stone circles remain exactly where they have always been. Their low outlines grow softer in the fading light, their edges blend gently with the surrounding ground. Nothing about their shape changes as night arrives. They do not react. They do not shift. They simply continue their long practice of staying. In the quiet of evening, these rings of stone feel less like structures and more like pauses set gently into the fabric of the land. They have paused here for thousands of years, and they will continue to pause without effort. As darkness deepens, the desert sky gradually opens into wider layers of darkness and faint light. The first stars appear without ceremony. They do not rush into view. They arrive the same way everything else does here, slowly and without insistence. The stone circles now rest beneath this widening sky, receiving starlight with the same calm they once received sunlight. Their surfaces no longer reflect brightness. They absorb quiet instead. The air cools further, but it does not rush into cold. It eases gently from one temperature into another, like a slow breath exhaled across the land. Nothing moves quickly now, even sound feels slower. The brushing of wind against rock becomes deeper and more even. Sand, which shifted lightly during the day, now settles into complete stillness. The desert seems to draw a soft boundary around itself, holding the quiet close. The stones do not participate in this shift by doing anything new. They simply continue to be what they have always been. Their long stillness does not grow heavier at night. It grows lighter, as if darkness lifts away the remaining traces of daytime motion. If anyone were to pass by now, their footsteps would sound softer than ever before. Even movement learns to slow itself in this atmosphere. The desert gently teaches everything how to rest. Through the night hours, the stone circles continue to rest like they have rested through countless nights before. They do not gather stories. They do not keep memories. They do not speak of what they have seen. They simply remain present within time without commenting on it. The role of the stones now is the simplest it has ever been. They are no longer markers of travel. They are no longer resting places for passing groups. They are no longer places of gathering. They are simply stones resting on the surface of the desert, existing at the same slow pace as darkness, wind, and sky. The idea of movement becomes very small now. Wind moves gently, the sky turns slightly as hours pass. Stars drift almost imperceptibly across the vast overhead space. The stones do not move at all. Their stillness does not resist the motion around them. It quietly complements it. Time seems to widen here rather than pass forward. Minutes do not step quickly into one another. They stretch, soften, and blend. The desert does not measure the night in units. It holds the night as one extended moment. Even temperature settles into a steady calm. The rocks lose the last whisper of warmth that daylight gave them. They grow cool in a way that feels smooth and balanced, never sharp. The air feels comfortably light, as if it too has decided to lower its voice. Nothing in this scene asks for attention. Nothing pulls focus. Everything simply rests where it is, exactly as it has learned to do over very long spans of time. As the final moments of the night deepen, the image of the desert becomes softer and more distant. The wide sky, the quiet wind, the cool stones, and the vast open space begin to drift gently toward the background of awareness. The stone circles remain lying quietly where they have always been, unchanged in form and untroubled by the passing of countless years. They do not move forward through time in any ordinary sense. Time simply moves around them while they continue their steady stillness. The wind passes once more across their edges, thin and even. The sand rests around their bases without shifting. The sky stretches wide above them without demanding anything in return. There is no motion to follow now, no activity to observe. Only presence remains, simple and quiet. The desert holds its breath in a long, calm pause that feels as though it could last forever. And as you gently close your eyes, the image of the desert, the stones, and the wide night sky begins to drift slowly away. The outlines soften, the distance grows lighter, the details fade without disappearing. Everything moves backward into comfort at the same gentle pace the land has always used. Nothing ends here. Nothing concludes with emphasis. The scene simply settles into stillness, and the stillness settles into rest. The desert continues to breathe quietly under the stars. The stones continue to rest where they have rested for thousands of years. And sleep arrives the same way everything else does, in this wide, patient land, calmly, softly, and without urgency.